All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with Ashley Leonard. It's June 25th, 2024, and we're in Lake Oswego. Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
First question, as you know, is why wine?
Why wine? Wine found me. I didn't seek wine out. I was 18 years old going into college. And as a academically trained, collegiately trained winemaker turned wine technologist, at the time it seemed to fit my professional aspirations, which were to find a technical career, like a technical foundation that also had this social fun twist to it. I was always kind of a science nerd growing up, and coming out of high school, you have no idea what like career paths are right for you, and I went to UC Davis and sort of found this career path that seemed to fit that interesting dichotomy that matched my personality. And then you start learning more about it and the storytelling that comes with it, and you get to do wine dinners and meet interesting people and have this beautiful artistic product that you've created that's your baby that you get to share with the world. I mean, it was an amazing opportunity at that time. So that's how wine found me.
So talk about life before wine a little bit. Tell us about where you're born and raised and life before college.
Yeah, so I'm from a little town called Woodside. It's about 30 minutes south of San Francisco. I'm a Bay Area baby. And I grew up there. It's very different now than it was back then. But it's a beautiful town. It's pretty rural, kind of like a horse town, even though I wasn't ever into horses. But it's right at the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains. So while like growing up, wine was not a part of my parents' life. Well, it was, but it wasn't in like a way that attracted me. They didn't really drink high quality wine. I wasn't exposed to that lifestyle very much. But again, I was sort of like there in this really beautiful, interesting region that I later came back to. But that's where I was born and raised. I went to Woodside High School in that area. It's a public high school in Redwood City. And then again, was just very interested in science off the bat. I was in middle school loving botany and biology and chemistry. And then in high school, kind of dove into the technical sciences more. And was like, what can I do with this interest of mine? And again, like I said, when you're going into college and wanting a technical science career, you kind of envision yourself in like this white lab coat in a lab your whole life. It's like, that's not for me. I don't really want that. And then again, I got into UC Davis, UC Santa Barbara were the two UCs, and I was always very attracted to the Northwest. I applied to the University of Oregon and UW in Washington and got into both. I was like, is this the time I want to go north? Something about it just like spoke to me. But I chose to go UC Davis, and then I found wine, and then things rolled from there.
So tell me about finding wine, and tell me about your UC Davis experience.
UC Davis was great. So again, I'm like a very technically oriented person, so the degree there was very appropriate for me and what I looked for. And the professors were incredible. The program was everything I expected it to be. I was exposed to really good foundational knowledge about how to make like clean wine the right way. And also there was really interesting students from the States, international, and we would do these tasting groups together. There's a couple clubs they had, and we were just exposed to such a beautiful latitude of different wines and different wine styles from here and around the world. And I just got exposure to not only develop my academic foundation, but also my palate, which as I got more into winemaking, it's so important to do that. And as I've gotten out of winemaking and more into wine tech, I've lost it. It's like, oh my gosh, like I'll happily drink most things now, but when you're making wine, you really have to refine that tool. So Davis did a really good job of kind of holistically, crafting me in the most well-rounded way. And one thing I wish the program did was make internships mandatory. They don't, but I was like, I want to get experience at 19. I want to know what I'm getting into here. So every harvest I made a point to go work at a winery. And mentioning mentors along the way. I was 18. Again, you know nothing about what it really means to make wine. At 19, I was like, okay, I'm gonna work in a winery. And back to the Woodside story where I'm from, there was a winemaker that lived there that made wine. He used to make wine for Chalone up in down in the Central Coast, a huge producer, and then started his own label. But it's like the coolest wine growing region up in the pinnacles, huge limestone like boulders throughout the vineyard, and just a really interesting guy, really interesting region where he had his own vineyard up there. And at 19, I think my mom knew him from walking dogs on a walk or something. I mean, totally serendipitous, which is how a lot of my career has gone, and probably most people's careers have gone. It's just you meet folks and carve your path out from there. But so my mom was like, hey, I met this guy who's a winemaker on a walk. Do you want to talk to him? I was like, I guess so. And he ended up just taking me under his wing. His name was Michael Michaud. And he was the most incredibly supportive mentor to me at that time. He said, I'm going to show you what it means to run a small brand. And he took me to his vineyard, which is like 2.5 hours south of where we lived. And he put me on a tractor and said, I'm gonna show you how to drive a tractor. I'm gonna show you how to apply bird netting. I'm gonna sit you down behind a laptop and show you how to process orders. And then I'm gonna take you to the winery, which was Testarossa in Los Gatos. And I'm gonna show you, the steps of actual winemaking. We're gonna do it together. We're gonna add SO2. We're gonna top. We're gonna rack. All those essential things. So I got exposure to that whole landscape of what it looked like to make wine at 19, which is pretty incredible. And then I remember he had these farmhouses on his vineyard property, and he had 2 houses, and we'd stay in each of our own houses, and we'd sit there at night and he would share wine with me. Sorry, Michael, yes, I was underage, thank you. But he would share wine with me and expose me to wine, and we would talk about it, and he was just such an open book for me at that time. So just so appreciate that early exposure to him and everything that he shared with me. And then from there, I worked, again, the next harvest for Testarossa, which, actually, no, that's not right. I worked for Pine Ridge first in Napa, which is under the Crimson Wine Group, I believe, also with Archery Summit up here and others. But I worked for Pine Ridge. I was like, I'm gonna get exposure to ultra premium Napa. I just wanna do that, see what that's like. So I did a cellar rat internship there. And then the next year is when I worked for Testarossa. So again, back to mentors. Bill Brasseau is still the head winemaker there today, and this was 2 decades ago. But he saw the work that I did for Michael and said, hey, if you want to come work for us, I would love to have you. So I went down and did an internship there with them, and that was cool because Testarossa makes Pinot from all up and down the West Coast. So I got exposure to Willamette Valley fruit all the way down to, San Ynez, Central Coast fruit, and everything in between, Santa Cruz Mountains, and again, very cool experience and exposure. And a lot of the best winemakers that I know today went through that internship program with me at that time. Like Grant Coulter, I met there, who's now with Fluenor and 100 Sons, right? Yep. So it was his first job in the wine industry there when I was there. And there's others too that the connections there are really interesting. But that was a nice breeding ground for winemakers. It's true. And then just to end out my Davis career, so that was my junior year. And then senior year, okay, I'm finishing up my undergraduate degree. Do I want to go to a master's program? Do I want to go study wine business? What makes sense for me next? And again, the mentor, Bill Brasseau at Testarossa, said, hey, I'm making wine for these 2 guys. They are at the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains. They have 22 acres of vines coming to maturity, and they want to create this new wine brand. And they need their first hire, someone that can come and kind of oversee the winemaking and the vineyard management, or the vineyard manager, I should say, as well as just launch this new product to market. and I was 21, 22. It's like, yeah, sign me up for that. That sounds amazing. That's the kind of experience I'm looking for. It's amazing, right? So after college, I graduated and went to work for these two gentlemen at Black Ridge Vineyards. I think the brand is no longer, but they had a gorgeous property right above Los Gatos, and I got to, again, get exposed to so many different aspects of the business there and help write the business plan, open the tasting room, hired the first hospitality manager, hired the tasting room staff, started the wine club, worked with the local broker as the winemaker, and would go around and do tastings with her and sell the wine, and pop down to the winery and help with winemaking, understand what the vineyard manager was doing, work with the bookkeeper on the financials and understand that. I mean, it was pretty cool.
Tell me about that. Obviously, you mentioned Davis, you had internship experience, you had technical knowledge. Jumping from that into that kind of role, that's a lot. So tell me about taking that on. What were the biggest challenges? What were the biggest learning opportunities?
So at Davis, I also did a minor in technical management through the MBA school, which was, thank goodness I did that, because I had some exposure to like what a supply chain was and and like statistics and, like a profit and loss statement, things that you otherwise wouldn't know. So that helped. But yeah, it was pretty intimidating at the time. I think the owners were relatively involved, so I wasn't locked up by myself and they just said to figure it out. But I kind of did, I referenced my education, I referenced my network at the time, and others were just really willing to help in the area. Other wineries that were buying fruit, other winemakers that were also making wine at the site that we were making wine at. The wine broker that we worked with, they were incredible, and they helped me understand what distribution looked like in the 3-tier system, and how margins work and how pricing works, and then the bookkeeper, her name was Kim. I would sit with her every week and she would walk me through what she was doing. So you just lean in at times, and you say, and it's okay to say, I don't know how to do this. I've never done this before. Can you help me understand this so I can better get a grasp on this going forward?
So at that point early in your career, did you have a goal in mind or a kind of a long-term vision for what you would do?
That's a great question. No, I loved what I was doing, but it was hard to see a long-term path ahead. I didn't really want to start my own wine brand. Probably would have been great if I was like, oh, start my own wine brand. Actually, in retrospect, I should have. I should have done that, but my nature is not entrepreneurial. I wasn't always like, oh, I need to start my own business. I need to do that. Yes. I was very comfortable working as like the second in command under owners that gave me the runway to go see their vision forward. So it's a good question, because I worked for Black Ridge for about 2.5, 3 years, and then they decided to kind of scale things back. I was actually there anticipating me becoming the winemaker when they built their winery on site. And I was like, oh, that's a great growth path right there. I can keep building this brand as the winemaker, because that's what I thought I wanted that at the time. But they said, no, we're going to actually scale it back. So I popped over to another small local winery called Regale and worked for a gentleman named Larry, who was kind of the same story, making wine off site, needed someone to come and run the business there. And I did a lot of the same things for about a year. I started the hospitality program and hired the tasting room staff and did all that. And at the end of the day, again, he decided that he didn't want to bring production on site. So I, again, wasn't given the growth opportunity that I wanted. And then I was kind of stuck. So I had a couple years of experience working for these small boutique wineries as a GM, director of operations in the Santa Cruz Mountains, which is a pretty insular region. And I thought, what now? I haven't only been doing winemaking, I've been doing everything. So to find another position within the region doing that again would be very difficult. I tried to expose myself to other regions, Napa Sonoma, is pretty insular at that point in time. Like I didn't have Napa Sonoma experience, so it's hard to break into those regions. I came up here to Oregon and I talked to a lot of wineries here. Actually, David Adelsheim was so kind to sit with me when I was like, I don't know what I'm, gonna do next. What does it look like making wine here or having a wine business here? And he was great. But it was hard. I mean, there wasn't a lot of opportunity that was like a direct next step for me. So I was like, okay, and I had this come to Jesus moment of like, what am I doing with my career? Where do I go? I was in my mid-20s, I was young, so I didn't really have a ton of experience that, again, applied. So I was like, okay, well, I've always been technical, and maybe I should just take a break from wine for a second and see what else is out there. And again, through my network, I'm a volleyball player, so I was coaching volleyball at Saratoga High School down there, and the boys and girls team, and I met a friend through volleyball there who worked in this other industry in Silicon Valley, and long story short, got connected to a gal at a company called Teledata, and she offered me a position in technical marketing at the time. And I was able to sort of take my winery marketing and winery event management skills and apply it to this role. So again, a complete left step from wine. And I said, okay, I'm gonna take this resume and put it on hold and go see if this is the right path. And she was an amazing mentor for me at that time when I was totally shifting careers, and helped expose me to what Silicon Valley looked like at that time and technology looked like. And it's an IT infrastructure consulting firm, so it's a mouthful. But I was basically studying technology trends and putting on this big conference called the Technology Convergence Conference. And I was responsible for the program material, for sourcing speakers, for coming up with the topics and the content, to coordinating sponsors. It's a big job to put on a big event. But in doing that, I was exposed to, again, the technology trends of like enterprise companies. And this was back in late 2000s. And it was at a time when these large enterprises were starting to adopt, or most people were starting to have smartphones. And all demographics were adopting smartphones. And so these big companies, the Apples and Facebooks and Googles, were thinking, well, we should let folks work from home, right? We should let them get exposure to their work information from home. So I was sort of following this mobility trend, we called it at the time, where they were allowing their employees to work from anywhere because of the smartphone boom. And that was my first exposure to like, software's kind of cool. Software's doing some neat things for other industries. How nice is it that you can work from anywhere now? That you don't have to be at your desk, at your office to get stuff done. You can work from home one day, you can be on vacation one day and check your email. And that was like my first minor like, winemaking is pretty remote. You're not behind your desk all day. And when I was around my desk all day, and my peers were as well, you didn't really want to be there, right? You're doing kind of like redundant, terrible computer work. That's what the reputation of software for winemakers was. It's like horrible, horrible computer work. You don't want to do that. So that was the exposure that I got to, that started to connect the dots for me of where I've now taken it. And I worked for them for a couple years, and then met my then boyfriend, now husband, who is much more entrepreneurial than I am, and had all these business ideas that we talked about. And he sort of probed me to say, have you ever thought about business ideas? I'm like, I don't know, not really, but there's, this like one idea I had, if I was to do production software. I have all this experience in winemaking. I know the ins and outs of it. I love technology. And, I used these software systems that no one liked, and they were cumbersome to use. There's this like necessary evil for compliance reasons. You got to maintain your records, but software's come so far, and I'm now exposed to it. It'd be cool if someone that came from winemaking built better software for wineries. And he said, you should do that. It's like, why wouldn't you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not like starting a company, a software company. I knew nothing about building software, nothing. So he sort of kept poking me and probing me like, you should really do this. You should talk to your cousin. And my cousin at the time was working in San Francisco for all the flashy startups and built back-end systems. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll talk to Andy about it. And I had drinks with Andy, my cousin, in August 2013. And I said, I have this business idea, I don't know, like here's the concept and here's the thesis and And he said, well, this sounds pretty interesting. Like, let me go take this and do some research and see what else is out there and see if this is something that I want to be a part of. And he called me the next morning, was like, we're doing this. We're doing this. There's these, like, no one is doing modern software at all. And there's a huge opportunity. And from there, we did it. So we incorporated it in November 2013. So almost 11 years now. And that's when I started InnoVint.
So what was, from your view at that time, what was innovative about what you were bringing to the table? So
the first piece of it tied back to my experience, which was the systems were really cumbersome and unfriendly to use. I wanted it to be friendly. So I wanted it to be approachable because a lot of winemakers, I mean, the landscape of winemakers as personalities is very diverse. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that. And I'm like, a lot of them don't like technology. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to use a computer at all. They're artists. I was like, so it has to appeal to those types of winemakers as well as the winemakers who are like, yes, better software to help me do my job. Awesome, I like get it. And over the 11 years, there's been a lot of learnings on how to appease all those audiences because it's essential. It's essential. So the first was make it approachable and intuitive and simple. Don't overbuild it. Don't overthink it. The second was to be approachable and simple, it needed to actually model the true process. And a lot of folks that had built software before InnoVint built it from other industries. So they took like a financial system and tried to shove it into winemaking, or they took a beer making system and tried to shove it into winemaking. It's just very, very different worlds. The beauty of winemaking is that it's still very manual and artistic, and it's not automated. It's not like beer or spirits where you're just, sending a recipe through from the same raw product every year. So I was like honoring that about the software, that it needs to be flexible to all the different types of wine that are made. I mean, still wine's very different from sparkling wine. And so that was also very important to me. And I wanted to do winemaking right first. So I went super deep in winemaking. Honestly, we probably built it way too complex for what it needed to do off the bat. Because I wanted to get it right. I was so passionate about it's got to actually model every winemaking workflow perfectly. So those are the differences of what made InnoVint different off the bat.
So tell me about launching a company. What were the first biggest steps?
So the first biggest step was figuring out how we were going to hire and pay engineers. Big time. It was, software development was becoming more financially accessible because things were modernizing at a point where you could plug and play more than, sit in a black room for 2 years and just build something from scratch. There were easier ways to get your work done. So that was good. But in order to use modern software, I needed to find modern engineers, and modern engineers are very expensive. So I was like, okay, well, we have to get some funding to get this going. So, I had this vision off the bat of, we went down Sand Hill Road and pitched VCs. We thought we wanted VC money. We had this huge addressable market, the global wine market. We could go into other verticals after that, and we tried that for a bit. And it was never really the right path for InnoVint. At the end of the day, the wine industry is a very niche market. Even if you get every winery in the whole world, it is extremely niche compared to software in general and that landscape. So it was making sure we had enough capital to get started, to hire a couple engineers. And so I got some friends and family funding from those that believed in the idea from my time in tech, and some other folks in wine. Winery owners, I will say Craig Hall from Hall Winery was incredible. And he's been a huge support agent, kind kind of behind the scenes for me, like letting me run it. But from the initial idea, he's like, I love this idea. I want to support you. The industry needs this. So you just find folks that love wine, understand technology, and are really just passionate about what we're trying to do. So I raised some funds that way and got it started, hired, a team of 10 or so, and spent about 2 years building it before taking it to market. But partnered with a lot of wineries every step of the way. I was very disciplined about, I don't want to bring any software to wineries without vetting every stage of it. Like I want to make sure it's actually, they have an appetite for it. So I did that across Napa Sonoma because I was down in San Francisco at the time. And then we launched it in 2015, more or less. And saw pretty organic growth over time. I hired winemakers to sell it because they understood everything they need to understand to communicate that, which was so important up front. You have to have the end user selling to other end users that can make it accessible and relatable because it is so new.
So before you get to the launch part, tell me about, you mentioned the development, you mentioned kind of bringing people in at all the stages. You talked earlier about wanting to develop it thoroughly but not overdo it. So tell me about walking that line and coming up with a product that you thought was at the right balance.
Sure. I find that now that I know much more about the software industry, I find that new companies go one of two routes. They either focus on a deep dive of product and engineering, and they go deep, which is what InnoVint did, or they kind of get what's called an MVP, a minimum viable product, out to market, and then start selling it and like marketing it and just let's go. We did not take that approach. We did the former, like I said, and an example is I hired basically industry folks to design the software as well. And winemakers are very passionate, and they can be stubborn and very opinionated on how things should be done. An example of a feature that we built super early was what we call the fermentation work order generator. And we still have it, it's great, it's like a power user thing. And it shows all the active ferments. At a small winery, you can have dozens of fermentations going at once. And it shows each of the vessels or the bins or tanks that you're using. It shows the current bricks, the bricks trend. It shows the work that's been done yesterday. It shows the work. It just was this very robust work assignment report of sorts, actionable report. And we did that like year 3. And it's still one of the most advanced pieces of technology that we have. Did we absolutely need to spend 4 months building that? Year 3, probably not. But it did really make what we were doing like truly authentic. And I think it does speak to my approach to doing things right by the industry, for the industry up front. And we have a great reputation today, and I actually think it's due in part to a lot of that. That like we didn't skip over anything to just jump to sales. We were like, no, we're going to build this that was right for the industry, and build the robustness that I know winemakers need.
What were the key sort of components you wanted to have? What were the key things you wanted to take off the table for winemakers not having to deal with, or not having to deal with in the way they had before?
So I wanted to have the software work on a tablet or a phone, because I wanted winemakers to be able to escape their desks. That was key. I wanted them to be able to go around, go barrel to barrel, record tasting notes. I wanted them to be able to go out in the vineyard, take photos of the vineyard or vines, an irrigation line's busted. I wanted them to be able to document that appropriately, to record maturity data, to be able to track their vineyards, and then be able to execute work. That was really big too. So off the bat, again, this like very complex work order system for making wine is very unusual and unlike any other manufactured product. So it was making sure that you could get all of your work done from scheduling fruit to the final bottling within InnoVint. Every step was mapped correctly. So it goes through, harvest operations, where you may bring in 5 different blocks of fruit, process them together. You may co-ferment some things together, then you split them out, then you ferment them separately, then, right? There's like all these intricate processes that I wanted to make sure that the phone captured correctly, because again, they're on the crush pad. They're not at their desk when they're in heavy season, heavy harvest season. So it was really important to me to make sure that the phone worked effectively. And then when they got back to their desk, I wanted to make sure that they could run reports quickly, because that's a problem I had too when I was making wine, and all my peers had as well, was, okay, I need to pull reports from, last quarter for the bookkeeper that needs to enter X, Y, and Z in. And it was painful, hours of Excel spreadsheets to get that done. So it's kind of those like two parallels, where it needed to be quick, accessible, mobile, but also simple and accessible from the computer when you needed to like do more robust reporting. And then from there, when we kind of like mastered this winemaking workflow, I was like, I've always thought, what other value can I bring to wineries? What else do they need from us or from anyone? Like, what other pain do they have? And a pain point was really understanding how much it costs to make wine. Most winemakers at the time when I thought about this did not know that. They had no idea, especially on a per product basis. Like what's our pricing? How much did it cost me? Or not even what's our pricing. What's our revenue? Because you can do discounting, depending on the channels. And then what's our revenue? How much did it cost me? And then that's the profit margin. And they really don't know. They didn't know. So I was like, well, we know all the cost inputs so accurately. We know the cost of the fruit coming in. We know the cost of the additives, the yeast, the bacteria they're adding. We know the packaging materials, the glass, the foils, the corks they're using, and the cost that each of those had. And then we know, why don't we build those inputs in? Those are like direct cost inputs, and just have that flow with the winemaking workflow. And then we allow the finance person to input the other, what's called cost of goods sold. So being able to input what the labor was in a month and spread that out across those wines. And then what the utilities of building were and spread those across the wines. So actually, when you go to bottle a wine in InnoVint, you can know all the technical winemaking stuff. And then you also know, it cost us $16 to make this bottle. Now I know. Cool. Okay, now our margins are really healthy. That's great. Or like, we're losing money on this guy, and I had no idea. Like maybe their expensive fruit was going into like a value wine or something, or they were pulling out, they were sauvignoning for rosé, and they weren't really accommodating for that cost differentiation, right? It's been enlightening and empowering for me to see wineries use this feature to make better business decisions. So that was this point of like, oh man, I want to help winemakers run better businesses. And it's been so cool. I was actually at Brooks recently, and my hat goes off to the enologist there. I don't remember his name, but I was sitting with him, and I said, is there anything else that you have questions about as the enologist here? And he had just been using InnoVint for his lab entry data. And he goes, I'd really like to know how much it costs us to make these wines. And I was like, yes, it's so cool to have a winemaker ask that question. And it's like this new generation is coming up, and they're asking more questions of winery leadership. Like, what's the health of the business? Are we making money or losing money? If we're losing money, is there a plan to make money? Are we growing? Are we not growing? They want to know those details about the business and not just stay sort of locked in their lane.
So you mentioned once you launched a kind of an organic growth. So tell me about initial sales, convincing the first few. What were the biggest challenges or surprises about sort of the initial customers?
So as a technology-focused winemaker myself, I was naive, as I think most early founders should be. You're like, everyone's gonna love this. They're all gonna get it. It's so obvious. And I started taking the product to market outside of just our original cohort of users, and I got a lot of pushback up front of like, you think I'm gonna let you bring a phone, or like my interns bring a phone into the dirty winery? Like, you're crazy. And some of those people are like our biggest champions today, which is great, like full converts, but even friends that went to Davis with me were like, there's no way this is ever gonna fly. We're not bringing that into a sticky, wet environment. So I got a lot of that up front, and with any new technology, you have to really source like the innovators. They're called the bleeding edge folks, where there's like, I know tech's gonna help me, I am excited about it naturally, and I'm gonna lean into this. So as long as you get those folks, and that was here in Oregon too, where like I can name them off the top of, on like one hand, who instantly was like, yes, right? And you really have to source those out up front. And then from there, it also has to just be organic. Like for us, you know, if I'd thrown a bunch of salespeople at this day one, I don't think it would have landed. And the wine industry is really unique in that way. Like it has to really come from an authentic place, especially when you're sort of pushing the envelope a bit, like what we were doing 10 years ago. So yeah, I mean, it's taken longer to get to where we are today than I would have liked, like I said, but I think, you know, that's just the nature of this industry. I don't think I would have changed much, you know, like going back. And so much of our positive reputation today is based on that, really just organically growing within networks. And each region is so referential. So if you get a couple folks on, you ask them to tell their neighbors about it, and you're just building, you know, relationships. It's all relationship driven. Everything about my whole professional career, about InnoVint's growth, it truly does all come back to relationships and the people that you know, and them believing in what you're doing and fostering your growth.
What were the biggest milestones for you, or the biggest sort of moments or events that were like, this is a big step for us?
That's a good question. I would say kind of marching towards like customer count milestones is really exciting. You know, we hit like, you know, 20 customers, wow, let's celebrate, you know, and then you hit 100, and then you hit 250, then you hit 500, and you're like, oh my gosh, you know, I would say that one of my strengths is not pausing to celebrate. It's not. So like my team has to remind me, like, let's, you know, like this was a big moment, let's celebrate. So those were great. I think landing, like catching the eye and the interest of some of the larger wineries has been really interesting in like recent years. So, you know, we started talking to Gallo, we were like 6 years ago now, and we're like, Gallo, whoa, like you know, we've sort of been circling in this like mid-market area in the wine industry. But they have an incredible team, and they're so forward thinking, and just like expanding our breadth of understanding in the industry. Cause I come from boutique. I only worked really for, you know, mostly boutique wineries. So it's been just enlightening and really satisfying to see InnoVint's value span from, you know, like a 200 case winery. It's probably our smallest winery on InnoVint that, again, just loves tech. Was like, this is it. It's gonna make my life great. All the way through millions and millions and millions of cases that are using InnoVint to drive workflow efficiencies. So yeah, I would say those are some of the major wins that we've had, and, you know, breaking into new regions and getting like a pioneer on board. You know, our first one here was Ponzi. That was like a huge win. I worked so hard to get Luisa on board with this, and her team on board, and they're just such a great innovation-driven culture there. Same with Brooks. Those are like the two early on that in Oregon really like got it. And it was really exciting to get them on board early.
Well, let's talk about Oregon and how you got here. You obviously mentioned you'd been up here before in your career, and you've been sort of drawn here. What made you actually come here?
So we were, what year was it? Okay, it was 2018. So I'd been running InnoVint for 5 years, and we sort of, I got married, I had my first son, and my husband and I were living in the Bay Area and both working, and I had a little baby, and we were living in the back of a duplex. Like, how do we survive here? And it was one of those conversations, and we had already gone hybrid with InnoVint, so we were half in office, half work from home. And again, always been drawn up here. My husband's from Washington State. He's from Olympia. His family's still in Olympia, and we were talking about what would it look like if we moved north. And life is serendipitous in ways, and he got a job offer up here in Tiger, and it was like, oh, is this the right time? Should we try it? And we tried it. So we moved up here to West Lynn almost 6 years ago. No, 6 years ago, yep. And that was exciting as well, because I was like, okay, now it's my chance to really go after it in the Northwest. I've been in Napa Sonoma, we've been well integrated there. This is my chance. So it did open me up to the wineries that I mentioned before, and Washington's been incredible as well. I love the Northwest. So that is what brought me up here 6 years ago, was that move.
How is it different than where you started? How is it different in Oregon and Washington than in California, from a wine industry perspective?
Oh, they all have their own identities. They really do. It's so interesting. Napa is definitely have the deepest pockets, which often means, which is often because the owners and the teams come from tech. Mm-hmm. So for InnoVint, it's a really fruitful ground for us for that reason. And then Sonoma's a bit different. As you kind of go up valley in Sonoma, they're also some of the same culture, I would say, but a little bit more organic, a little bit from a sentiment standpoint. Mm-hmm. Just more organic, more maybe less competitive. Napa's quite competitive. Mm-hmm. And then as you expand from there, you have the Central Coast, which is sort of like Sonoma, Santa Cruz Mountains, amazing wines can come from there, but also kind of they could use a push as well to kind of lean in more and promote the region more and things like that. And then Oregon and Washington have been fascinating. I would say demographic wise, Washington State has been more adoptive of technology in general, for whatever reason. You kind of have the two regions. You have Woodinville and you have Walla Walla, and then the vineyards are, in the valleys in the middle, or also in Walla Walla. But they've been really ripe for us as well. And I've been very pleased with working with the wine industry there. And then Oregon, I would say, of all that I've mentioned, is probably the most traditional and the most, it's been probably the most difficult to have conversations about technology here. That being said, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? I think it is an incredible region. The winemakers are incredibly talented. The businesses are doing great things. I would love to honestly get more involved in the Oregon wine industry to help foster tourism here. I think they could benefit from more foot traffic. I just saw this morning the Silicon Valley Bank's DTC report came out, and I saw one quick flash, and it showed Oregon tasting traffic compared to others, and they were the lowest of Washington and Napa Sonoma. And I was like, oh, we got to get that up. I know that there are some really strong players that are trying to do that, but incredible wines here, and I continue to be excited about the growth potential for InnoVint and the state in general. And with climate change, it's interesting, right? Things are shifting too. I think the quality will keep increasing here depending on what your style is, but I think it only sort of helps Oregon in a way continue to foster better quality.
That's so interesting. Such an interesting perspective on the states. Mm-hmm. Tell me about impressions of the wines here. You mentioned obviously incredible wines. Impressions of Oregon wine, and sort of what can InnoVint do to help them take the next step?
So I did a panel at the Oregon Wine Symposium on how to run a healthy wine business. And I think, and this is not unique to Oregon, but I think the wine industry in general has been sort of riding on the coattails of wine is just a growing category. And people are drinking more premium wine, and they've just been kind of riding that train, which is great. But the fact that has been happening means that maybe they haven't been having to look under the hood as much at the health, the financial health, the operational health, and the cultural health of the business. So I had on my panel was Alex Sokol-Blosser and then two other service providers talking about that. What does the landscape look right now with the category of wine sort of for some, not all, some wine sales are declining, costs are increasing, maybe consumers are not as loyal as they once were to certain brands, and they're sort of, playing the field with other wine brands and other beverage alcohol categories. And it's like, what does all this mean? So Oregon, and again, really every region should be taking a closer look at the business going forward. And that's where I hope InnoVint can help them. We're doing a lot of education around bringing experienced CFOs from wineries and operators from wineries, and C-suite CEOs that have experience in really practicing best practice around these things. I'm doing a 3-series webinar series in July with 6 different end users about this. Like, again, just trying to foster education and build community. Those are really big initiatives of ours right now. One of the issues I had when I was making wine was I felt very isolated, especially in the Sanders Mountains, but it was very hard to cross-pollinate across regions. If I had a question about something, or I wanted to taste wine with someone with a similar product in a different region, it was just, I had no way of contacting them. So InnoVint started the Punch Down, which is a digital online community where you can go, and the intent is to bridge the gaps between the regions and help connect folks with best practice or technical questions or sales questions, have a marketplace for jobs and equipment and things like that. So again, like, back to your question of how can I and InnoVint help Oregon, I think it's all of the above. It's not agnostic to, or it's not specific to Oregon. It's all wineries kind of need to look at how do we continue to grow together, and that's by way of, in my opinion, running better businesses and running more like true businesses and not necessarily hobbies at times.
What has InnoVint not done yet that you want? What is sort of next on the technology, or the how else can it grow in its sort of desire to help wineries?
Well, it's a couple things. So AI is this big scary acronym right now, but I do think that there is really interesting potential there to help streamline operations even more by helping predict and forecast and inform decisions that can be made. So we're looking into that on the technology side. On what else can we be doing? I am interested in helping more international wineries as well. So we're looking at the major markets. We work with 2 of the largest wineries in Australia right now, and that's an interesting market, as well as some other English-speaking countries in the Southern Hemisphere, and obviously Europe and others. So figuring out what the go-to-market plan is for those is exciting. And then also continuing to build winemaking features, not losing focus on that is also equally important to exploring new terrain. You can't give up your bread and butter. So we're still very much focused on that. And actually this next foray, we're releasing a new product that helps wineries sell more effectively. And it's this gap right now between, okay, we've made wine, we've bottled it, now it's sitting here, and then we're gonna sell it. So how do we manage the inventory before it goes to our distributors and it goes to DTC in the tasting room, and there's this black box right here. So we're helping them better manage that inventory. So that's exciting because it does help them run better businesses by having a better grasp on being able to do that. And I had a winery owner tell me that he thinks he's just wasting money because he's paying taxes on inventory that he doesn't know what happened to. He'll do a physical count and be short a bunch of dozens of cases, and it's well, I can't defend where I sent it, so I have to pay taxes on it. So allowing them to better manage that is important to us.
How you mentioned one of the reasons that you and your cousin were so excited about it was this was a missing part of the market at that point. How has the wine technology sector grown since you've started? What does it look like now?
It's been interesting, actually. So I sort of knew that by doing what we now call like a winery's operating system. We're a winery operating system. We sit in the middle of the landscape of growing, making, and selling. We're in the middle right now, more or less. It's been interesting to watch even just like our specific segment mature. The legacy providers that I talked about early on that inspired me to start this have been acquired and are under, you know, private equity or been like dissolved. So that's been interesting to see technologists and capital try and figure out how to automate the whole supply chain across the industry. So a lot of folks want to break down the 3-tier system in the long run and like have a more consolidated technology approach to growing, making, and selling wine and beer and spirits and all of it. So that'll be interesting to see that, you know, play out. But in our space, you know, I didn't anticipate a ton of competition to come in and also do winemaking software, again, because it's just very niche. So, you know, I'm very proud of the fact that we've stayed ahead of modern software development, and like we have an amazing team so that they're able to understand what continues to be best or adopt new best practice as things change so fast in technology. That's been exciting. I've seen a lot of tech come out on the growing side. There's a lot of IoT, the Internet of Things, so sensors and irrigation management, water management, NDVI mapping. I mean, there's so much on that side. It's more crowded than I would have anticipated, but I think that's because it's coming in from other crop management. So I'd say that's, I don't know how healthy that side of it is for their wine customers. But there is tech there. And then the sales side, there's a lot of, I guess the most exciting space that I've seen is the analytical side, like helping wineries understand, this is important to running better businesses, where is our wine being sold? If we're seeing less foot traffic in our tasting room, how can we sell more wine direct? Where do we go to do that? If it's not on site, where is our main market? So there's a lot of technology on that side that's helping them understand, oh, well, you know, I'll just name a random winery. You know, Brooks, I mentioned Brooks. Brooks, you have a ton of customers located in Arlington, Virginia. It's like, wow, that's like a really ripe ground for you. You should go do events in Arlington, and you should go, you know, target them from a marketing perspective. So there's been really interesting technology on that front. So I hope wineries embrace some of the solutions that are out there on that front because they need it. Otherwise you're flying blind and you see your sales stagnate and you're like, why are they stagnating? There are tools to help them better target where to capitalize on that.
You mentioned your team earlier. Tell me about managing a team. Obviously, a lot of growth for the company, a lot of growth for the team, I assume. Tell me about how you built that and what's the culture you've tried to kind of bring here.
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, we went hybrid pretty early. So we were on site. The core founding team was on site for a lot of it. Or for the first early years, and then we went hybrid. So, you know, my CTO lives in San Francisco. He's still there today. I'm up here in Oregon. I have a board member in Seattle. I have some leaders in the East Coast. So we've really, like, over time kind of expanded and we've decentralized ourselves. And that presents a lot of challenges. When you're in office every day, the culture is the culture. It more is just like, it's literally in your face every day. Whereas when you're remote, you really have to focus and prioritize as a leader, building a culture, a healthy remote culture. So I guess we figured out how to do that early on before the pandemic, and the pandemic really, like, honestly helped so much with InnoVint and our company and this industry embrace so much of what we were trying to do. But from a team building standpoint, we use tools like Slack. We stay in constant contact through these like chat apps, and I really made a point to get together often in person, because without that, you don't really get to build those strong relationships. So we do all hands offsites. We went to Austin this year, last year, and we did like a week at a Hyatt and did all sorts of events and market, and we went wine tasting and Texas Hill Country, and so all that, like making sure that we get together as individual teams and as the whole company is really important to keep everyone happy and satisfied at InnoVint, because I don't want anyone working for this company that's not happy and satisfied and like excited and passionate about the future that's ahead. So I think we've also done a really good job of hiring for that as well, that it's equally important to get the right culture fit of those that are really have a growth mindset, that are innovative, that experiment, that also have like the skill set you're looking for.
So you talked earlier about Oregon and where it kind of stands in your eyes right now as a wine industry. Tell me about the future for Oregon. What do the next few years look like? What are you excited about, and maybe what are you leery of for the Oregon's wine's future?
I'm probably not like the best person to ask that of, because I don't spend all my time studying Oregon, but I do think that there is, again, this push for Oregon to figure out how to attract consumers to the area, even if it's not like foot traffic here, of how to expose Oregon in a more broad way. And again, I think we've done a great job, but there's always room for improvement there. I am excited to see this younger generation, like the enologists at Brooks, come in and start asking really smart questions about how the business is run, not just what this pH reading means. It's like really important to see smart, curious professionals come and work for wineries here. So that excites me as well. Again, I think the growing region is super strong. It's so fun to see the different microclimates that exist across the different AVAs, and that's not going anywhere, right? I think that'll only evolve and deepen, and it's just been fun to also see the varietals change over time and see new varietals coming up. My favorite region right now is the Hood River region. I think like Anna Lim is doing an amazing job with the fruit out there, and it's I just think the quality coming out of non-Willamette Valley is as exciting as some of the Willamette Valley microclimates as well.
And what's next for you? Tell me about what's on your horizon, either personally or professionally.
Oh my goodness, that's a big question. What is it? Well, I have, the balance of personal and professional is probably the greatest challenge right now, because I have two young boys. They're 4 and 7, and it's a lot. So, balancing home life and their activities and priorities, along with, carving out time for InnoVint and my career progression. I'd say professional, it's been really enlightening and gratifying to hire some really experienced leadership at InnoVint recently. Like you mentioned earlier, what's it like growing a company over time? Like, what are the pain points? It's been really hard to level up at times. It's been really hard. You kind of get stuck and you hit your head against a ceiling. You're like, what do I do here? I don't have experience, breaking down the ceiling and taking it to the next level. So it's been helpful to get advisement along the way on that, and hire really great leaders that come from other software sales environments and other software marketing environments that can come and apply best practice. Again, we're kind of like dog fooding what I'm telling the industry to do here at InnoVint. Like, keep leveling up, keep asking the right questions, and that's been just really satisfying to see, to be able to do that and execute on some of the thought leadership that I talked about, doing the education and really trying to give back as much as we can. Personally, I don't know, trying to stay fit, trying to keep moving, trying to get involved in the industry more, like contribute. I'm a mentor for another CEO that started a tech company in the industry, and just helping her as a first-time founder navigate what that means, because there's so many lessons learned your first time round that if you meet another first timer, my goodness, you're like, I remember how lost I was. So I want to continue to help the industry. I'm trying to build a network of like fractional experienced folks like CFOs and CIOs to help wineries understand how do we again level up our financial aptitude or operational aptitude, because it's not from InnoVint. Like I have a great network that I can connect with the wineries that work with us. So I'm trying to build relationships in that way as well. So it's all still keeps me very excited and engaged, and I don't have an immediate plan to do anything else but this. I think there's still so much opportunity and growth to keep helping the wine industry.
All right. That's all the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have, or anything that we didn't cover today that you'd like to cover?
I don't think so.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your story with us, and we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.